Albert had never married, had no children, no family. So why had he spent 15 years every morning caring so much about the safety of school children? Why had he quietly, secretly helped dozens of families? When the 50 letters found in his bag revealed not just what he had done, but why he had done it, no one could have known that this old man's true story would break everyone's heart. The clock tower in the center of Millbrook struck 5:30 a.m. as Albert Hoffman pushed his worn cleaning cart down Elm Street toward Roosevelt Elementary School. At 67, he had been making this same journey every weekday morning for the past 15 years, arriving long before the first teachers, long before the school buses, long before anyone would notice the quiet man who ensured their children's path was safe and clean. Albert was a small man, barely 5 feet 6 inches tall, with silver hair that stuck out from under his faded baseball cap and gentle brown eyes that seemed to notice everything while drawing attention from no one. He wore the same navy blue coveralls every day, patched in several places but always clean, and carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who took pride in work that others might consider thankless. The residents of Elm Street had grown so accustomed to Albert's presence that he had become part of the morning landscape, as predictable as the sunrise. Children rushing to catch the school bus would see him sweeping the sidewalks, picking up litter, checking that storm drains were clear. Some would wave. Albert would always wave back with a smile that seemed to light up his entire weathered face. But Albert's routine went far beyond simple street cleaning. He would carefully inspect every inch of the 3-block radius around the school, looking for anything that might pose a danger to the children. Broken glass that might cut a small hand, loose bricks that could cause someone to trip, ice patches in winter that needed salt, overgrown branches that might block a crosswalk sign. What the community didn't know was that Albert's dedication came from a place of profound personal purpose. His small apartment was filled with notebooks containing detailed observations. Which children walked alone and might need extra attention? Which families seemed to be struggling? Which elderly residents hadn't been seen for a few days and might need a wellness check? Albert had appointed himself the unofficial guardian of this small corner of Millbrook, and he took that responsibility more seriously than most people took their paid careers. Mrs. Henderson, who lived in the house directly across from the school, had watched Albert's morning routine for years. A widow in her 70s, she was often awake early and would see him through her kitchen window as she prepared her morning tea. "He's like clockwork, that one," she would tell her daughter during their weekly phone calls. "Rain or shine, snow or heat, that man is out there making sure everything's perfect for the children. Never asks for anything in return, never complains." I don't think I've heard him speak more than a few words to anyone in all these years. What Mrs. Henderson didn't know was that Albert had been quietly paying her heating bill for the past 3 winters after he noticed her bundling up inside her house and realized she was struggling with the costs. The payments were made anonymously through the utility company, with instructions that Mrs. Henderson was never to be told where the money came from. This was just one of Albert's many secrets. Albert's workday officially began at 6 a.m. when he would clock in at the municipal building, but his unofficial work started much earlier and extended far beyond his job description. As the city's maintenance worker assigned to the school district area, he was responsible for keeping the streets clean and the public spaces maintained. But Albert had transformed this basic role into something approaching a calling. During his lunch breaks, Albert would visit the local grocery store, not to shop for himself, but to quietly observe the families checking out. He had developed an uncanny ability to spot the signs of financial struggle: the parent counting and recounting change, the child putting back a desired item because it wasn't in the budget, the family choosing generic brands and carefully calculating every purchase. When Albert identified a family in need, he would spring into action with the stealth of a secret agent. He would ask the cashier to apply an "anonymous scholarship" to the family's bill, paying the difference out of his own modest paycheck. The cashiers, who had grown to admire Albert's quiet generosity, would play along, telling the families that they had been randomly selected for assistance from a community fund. "That man has the biggest heart and the smallest budget I've ever seen," said Maria Santos, who had worked as a cashier at Millbrook Grocery for 8 years. "He probably spent half his paycheck every month helping other people. But he would make me promise never to tell anyone where the money was coming from. He said it wasn't about him getting credit, it was about families getting help." Albert's generosity wasn't limited to grocery bills. He kept a mental catalog of the neighborhood's needs and found ways to address them, always anonymously, always without seeking recognition. When the Johnsons' car broke down and they couldn't afford repairs, making it impossible for Mrs. Johnson to get to her job at the hospital, Albert arranged for a local mechanic to fix the car and send the bill to a charitable organization, which was actually Albert paying in installments over several months. When 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez needed glasses but a single mother couldn't afford them, Albert contacted the optometrist and established a fond that covered Tommy's eye exam and glasses. Tommy's mother never knew that the fund consisted entirely of Albert's overtime pay from working weekends. During harsh winters, Albert would wake up at 4 a.m. to shovel the sidewalks around the school and the homes of elderly residents, ensuring that children and seniors could navigate safely. He would spread salt on icy patches, clear snow from storm drains, and even repair minor hazards like loose handrails or broken steps. The children of Elm Street grew up seeing Albert as a fixture of their daily routine, but they had no idea he was watching over them with the protective instinct of a guardian angel. He knew which children walked to school alone and would time his route to ensure he was visible during their journey, providing an adult presence in case they needed help. He knew which children came from troubled homes and would make special efforts to smile and wave, offering them a moment of kindness in what might otherwise be a difficult day. Albert's most profound secret lay in a ritual he had maintained for 12 years, ever since he had witnessed something that changed his perspective on his work and his purpose in the community. It was a cold February morning in 2012, when Albert arrived at his usual time to begin cleaning around the school. As he swept to the front steps, he noticed a small piece of paper that had been carefully folded and placed under a rock near the flagpole. Curious, Albert picked up the paper and unfolded it. Written in a child's careful handwriting were the words, "Dear God, thank you for the nice man who makes sure we're safe when we walk to school. Please keep him healthy so he can keep taking care of us. Love, Emma." Albert stared at the note for a long time, his eyes filling with tears. He had no idea that the children noticed his work, let alone appreciated it. This simple prayer, written by a 7-year-old who didn't even know his name, touched something deep in Albert's heart. He carefully folded the note and placed it in his wallet, where it would remain for the rest of his life. That evening, Albert sat at his small kitchen table and wrote his first letter. "Dear Emma, you don't know me, but I found your prayer this morning. I want you to know that it made an old man very happy to learn that someone notices the work I do. I have been taking care of your school and your neighborhood for many years because I believe that children deserve to feel safe and protected. I hope you know that you are a special girl with a kind heart. Keep writing to God. He listens to children's prayers more than grown-ups sometimes realize. Your friend, the street cleaner." Albert had no way to deliver the letter directly to Emma without revealing his identity, but he carefully filed it away in a folder that he labeled "Letters to the Children." Over the following months, Albert began finding more notes from children, some addressed to God, some to their parents who had died, some to imaginary friends, and some simply expressing hopes and fears. The children had apparently discovered that the area near the flagpole was a safe place to leave their private thoughts, trusting that no one would disturb them. Albert never took the children's notes, but he read each one carefully before replacing it exactly where he had found it. And for each note he found, he wrote a response letter, not to interfere with the children's private communications, but to process his own emotional response to their innocence, their struggles, and their trust. The letters became Albert's way of connecting with the community he served, even though the connection would remain forever one-sided. Through his written responses, he could express the love and concern he felt for these children, emotions that his natural shyness made difficult to communicate in person. As years passed, Albert's collection of letters grew to encompass far more than responses to children's notes. He began writing to the elderly residents he helped, the struggling families he assisted, and even to people he observed from a distance who seemed to be going through difficult times. When Mr. Petrov, an elderly widower who lived 2 blocks from the school, stopped coming outside for his daily walks, Albert wrote him a letter. "Dear Mr. Petrov, I have noticed that you haven't been taking your usual walks lately, and I wanted you to know that someone has noticed your absence. I hope you are feeling well, and that whatever is keeping you inside will pass soon. I have lived in this neighborhood for many years, and I have observed that you always take time to pet the neighborhood dogs and smile at the children. These small acts of kindness make the world a better place. If you ever need anything, groceries, medicine, or just someone to check on you, please know that help is available. Sometimes we just need to ask. With respect and concern, a neighbor who cares." Albert never sent these letters, but writing them helped him process his feelings about the people whose lives he touched indirectly through his work. When the Martinez family's house was damaged in a fire and they had to move into a cramped apartment while saving money for repairs, Albert wrote, "Dear Martinez family, I know that you are going through a very difficult time right now, and I want you to know that your neighbors are thinking of you and hoping for better days ahead. Sometimes life presents us with challenges that seem too big to overcome, but I have watched your family for several years, and I have seen the love and strength that holds you together. That love will see you through this difficult time. Please remember that accepting help from others is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are surrounded by people who care about you. There are more people in this community who want to help than you might realize. With admiration for your resilience, someone who believes in your family." The letters became Albert's emotional outlet, allowing him to express feelings of love, concern, hope, and encouragement that he was too shy to communicate directly. Through his writing, he could be the wise grandfather, the caring neighbor, the supportive friend that he longed to be in person but didn't know how to become. Some letters were addressed to children who had moved away over the years. "Dear Michael, who used to live on Oak Street, I hope you are doing well in your new city and that you are making friends at your new school. I remember how nervous you were during your last week here, worried about leaving everything familiar behind. I want you to know that you are one of the kindest children I ever observed during my years working in this neighborhood. You always helped younger children who dropped their books, and you never walked past an elderly person without saying hello. These qualities will serve you well wherever you go. The world needs more young people with kind hearts like yours. I hope your new neighborhood has someone like me who watches over the children and keeps them safe. If not, maybe you can be that person for someone else when you grow up. With best wishes for your future, the street cleaner from Elm Street." On a Tuesday morning in October 2024, Albert followed his routine exactly as he had for the past 15 years. He arrived at 5:30 a.m., checked the school perimeter for safety hazards, swept the sidewalks, and made note of anything that would need attention later in the day. At 67, Albert was slowing down slightly, but his dedication never wavered. He still arrived early, still noticed every detail, still took pride in ensuring that the children would have a safe environment for their learning. That morning, Albert found a note from 10-year-old Sarah Chen, who had been struggling with her parents' recent divorce. "Dear anyone who might care, my mom and dad are getting divorced, and everything is scary and different. I wish someone could tell me that everything will be okay, but nobody seems to know for sure. I feel invisible most of the time. If there are any angels out there, could you please watch over my little brother? He doesn't understand why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. Love, Sarah, the invisible girl." Albert read the note with tears in his eyes, carefully replaced it under its rock, and made a mental note to write a response letter that evening. He had observed Sarah's family during their difficult transition and had been looking for ways to help without intruding on their privacy. At 3:47 p.m., as Albert was driving the municipal maintenance truck back to the depot, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He managed to pull the truck to the side of the road before collapsing across the steering wheel. Passersby called for help immediately, but by the time paramedics arrived, Albert Hoffman had quietly passed away from a massive heart attack. The man who had spent 15 years ensuring other people's safety had died alone in a truck, with no family to notify and few people who even knew his full name. Albert's death was noted in the local newspaper with a brief obituary. Albert Hoffman, 67, longtime city maintenance worker, died Tuesday of a heart attack, services pending. No immediate family. It was the kind of obituary that most people skip over. A life summarized in 2 sentences, a person reduced to a job title, and the absence of survivors. The city's personnel department was tasked with cleaning out Albert's truck and personal belongings. When maintenance supervisor Bob Rodriguez opened Albert's work bag, he expected to find the usual assortment of tools, work gloves, and perhaps a thermos or lunch container. Instead, he found a carefully organized collection of 50 letters, each one handwritten in Albert's precise script, each one addressed to a different person in the community. Bob's hands shook as he read the first few letters. He realized immediately that he was holding something precious, a window into the heart and mind of a man who had lived a life of profound generosity and love, completely hidden from public view. "I need to call someone," Bob murmured to his assistant. "These letters, they need to be shared. People need to know who Albert really was." Bob contacted the school principal, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who agreed to meet him that evening to review the letters and determine how to honor Albert's memory appropriately. As Dr. Walsh read through the letters, she wept openly. Here was evidence of a man who had known her students, her families, her community, better than many people who worked directly with them. Here was documentation of a love so pure and selfless that it had been hidden from view for over a decade. "We have to share these," Dr. Walsh said. "Not to invade Albert's privacy, but to let people know what they've lost, and to let the children know that they were loved by someone they barely knew." Dr. Walsh organized a memorial service for Albert at the school gymnasium, sending notices home with students and posting announcements throughout the neighborhood. She wasn't sure how many people would attend a service for a man most residents knew only as the street cleaner, but she felt it was important to try. On the evening of the memorial service, Dr. Walsh was amazed to see the gymnasium filling with people. Families came with their children. Elderly residents walked slowly through the doors, and even teenagers who had grown up seeing Albert every morning made their way into the building. Dr. Walsh began the service by reading selected letters that Albert had written, changing names to protect privacy but preserving the essence of his words. As she read, the audience grew increasingly quiet, and many people began to cry. She read Albert's letter to the struggling single mother. "I have watched you walk your children to school every morning for 3 years, and I have seen the love in your eyes and the determination in your steps. Being a parent is the hardest job in the world, and doing it alone makes you a hero in my eyes." She read his letter to the elderly man who had lost his wife. "Grief is love with nowhere to go, but I want you to know that your love for your wife continues to make the world more beautiful. I see it in the way you tend her garden, in the way you feed the birds she loved, in the way you smile at children because she would have wanted you to." She read his letter to the teenage boy who had been getting into trouble. "I know that people look at you and see problems, but I look at you and see potential. You have energy and intelligence that could change the world if directed towards something positive. I believe in the person you can become." As Dr. Walsh continued reading, people in the audience began to realize that Albert had known them, had cared about them, had been watching over them with the dedication of a guardian angel they never knew existed. Mrs. Henderson stood up during the service and said, "I need to tell you all something. For the past 3 winters, someone has been paying my heating bill anonymously. I never knew who it was, but now I think I do." She was crying as she spoke. "Albert never let me thank him because I never knew it was him." Maria Santos from the grocery store raised her hand and said, "Albert used to pay for families' groceries without them knowing. He would come in on his lunch break and ask me to apply an, quote, anonymous scholarship to their bill. He probably helped dozens of families over the years." One by one, people began sharing stories of mysterious help they had received. Car repairs paid for by an unknown benefactor, medical bills covered by an anonymous donor, winter coats that appeared on doorsteps with no explanation. The community began to realize that Albert Hoffman hadn't just been their street cleaner. He had been their secret guardian, their silent protector, their hidden angel. 10-year-old Sarah Chen, whose note Albert had found on his final morning, stood up and said in a small voice, "I wrote a letter saying I felt invisible, but now I know that someone saw me. Mr. Albert saw all of us." Following the memorial service, Dr. Walsh worked with the community to establish the Albert Hoffman Kindness Fund, supported by donations from the many families who had been helped by Albert's generosity. The fund would continue Albert's work of providing anonymous assistance to families in need. But perhaps more importantly, the community decided to continue Albert's letter-writing tradition. A small mailbox was installed near the school flagpole where Albert used to find the children's notes, with a sign that read, "Albert's Mailbox, for letters of kindness and hope." Children and adults began leaving letters of encouragement for each other, creating a communication network of support and love that Albert had unknowingly started. The letters were collected weekly by volunteers who would either deliver them directly or respond with supportive messages of their own. Sarah Chen's mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, wrote the first adult letter to the mailbox. "Dear Albert, I know you can't read this, but I needed to write it anyway. My daughter Sarah left a note saying she felt invisible, not knowing that you had been watching over her and all of our children for 15 years. I want you to know that you taught us something important about love, that the most powerful love is often the love that expects nothing in return, the love that works in silence, the love that protects without seeking recognition. Because of your example, I am going to try to be more aware of the people around me who might need help. I am going to try to love more like you did, quietly, consistently, without expecting applause. Thank you for showing us what it means to be a true neighbor. With deep gratitude, a mother whose child you protected." The letter-writing tradition grew to include people from neighboring communities who had heard Albert's story. Letters arrived from other cities, other states, from people who had been inspired by the story of the quiet street cleaner who had loved his community in secret. A letter arrived from a teacher in California. "Dear Millbrook community, I read about Albert in a news article, and his story has changed how I think about my work and my life. I have started looking for ways to help my students and their families without them knowing it was me. Yesterday, I paid for a student's school supplies anonymously, and the smile on his face when the school counselor told him about the, quote, mysterious donor was worth more than I can express. Albert's legacy is spreading. Thank you for sharing his story with the world. Inspired by kindness. A teacher who wants to love like Albert." 1 year after Albert's death, Roosevelt Elementary School dedicated its newly renovated playground to his memory. A bronze plaque was installed near the entrance with an inscription that read, "In memory of Albert Hoffman, who spent 15 years keeping our children safe and a lifetime keeping our community together through the quiet power of unconditional love." But the real memorial to Albert wasn't made of bronze. It was made of changed hearts and transformed lives. Mrs. Henderson, now 78, had started a Secret Santa program that provided winter coats and warm meals to struggling families, always delivered anonymously. "Albert taught me that kindness doesn't need credit," she explained. "It just needs to be done." The Martinez family, whose house fire Albert had worried about in one of his letters, had established a disaster relief fund to help other families facing similar crises. "We never knew Albert was thinking about us," said Mrs. Martinez, "but now we want to think about others the way he thought about us." Michael, the boy who had moved away years earlier and had been the subject of one of Albert's letters, returned to Millbrook as a young adult to attend the playground dedication. Now a social worker in Chicago, he credited Albert's invisible influence with inspiring his career choice. "I never talked to Albert directly," Michael said during the dedication ceremony, "but somehow he taught me that we all have a responsibility to watch over each other. I became a social worker because I wanted to be like the street cleaner who noticed everything and cared about everyone." The most profound impact was on the children who had grown up under Albert's protection. They were now teenagers and young adults, and many of them spoke about how knowing Albert's story had changed their understanding of what it meant to be a good person. Sarah Chen, now 11 and no longer feeling invisible, had started a kindness club at school. "Mr. Albert showed us that you don't have to be rich or famous to make a difference," she told her classmates. "You just have to care about people and be willing to help them." Among Albert's 50 letters, one stood out as particularly special. It was addressed simply to the community I love and was dated just 1 week before his death. "To my dear neighbors, if you are reading this, it means that I am gone and someone has found my letters. I hope you will forgive an old man for writing about things he was too shy to say out loud. For 15 years, I have had the privilege of watching over your children and caring for your families from a distance. This work has been the greatest joy of my life, not because I am a saint, but because love always finds a way to give purpose to our days. I want you to know that every act of kindness I was able to perform, every small help I was able to offer, came back to me multiplied in the form of the smiles on your children's faces, the safety I felt in your community, and the sense of belonging I found in being useful to others. I never had children of my own, but I got to help raise all of yours. I never had a family of my own, but I got to be part of all of your families. I never had wealth, but I got to experience the richness of a life spent in service to others. Please don't mourn for me too long. Instead, please remember that the greatest memorial you can build is not made of stone or bronze. It is made of continuing to care for each other the way you allowed me to care for you. Watch over the children, help the families who struggle, notice the elderly who might be lonely. Be the guardian angel for someone else that I tried to be for you. The secret to a meaningful life is not in being seen or recognized. It is in seeing others and recognizing their worth. You gave my life meaning by letting me love you, even though you didn't know I was doing it. Thank you for 15 years of purpose. Thank you for letting an old man matter. With all my love and gratitude, Albert Hoffman, your secret guardian." When Dr. Walsh read this final letter at the 1-year memorial service, there wasn't a dry eye in the gymnasium. The community had lost Albert, but they had gained something precious in return, an understanding of how love works in the world, often silently, often invisibly, but always powerfully. Albert Hoffman's story reminds us that the most profound impact on the world often comes not from those who seek recognition, but from those who work quietly in the background, motivated by nothing more than love and a desire to make life better for others. For 15 years, Albert swept more than just streets. He swept away dangers, swept away struggles, swept away the loneliness that can make people feel invisible and forgotten. He did it without fanfare, without expectation of gratitude, without even the satisfaction of seeing the full impact of his work. But Albert's greatest gift to his community wasn't the money he spent or the problems he solved. It was the example he set of what it means to love without condition, to serve without recognition, to dedicate your life to the welfare of others simply because it is the right thing to do. In a world that often celebrates the loud and the flashy, Albert's story is a quiet reminder that the real heroes walk among us unnoticed, making life better for everyone through the accumulation of small, daily acts of love. The 50 letters found in Albert's bag weren't just correspondence. They were a masterclass in compassion, an instruction manual for kindness, a blueprint for building a life that matters not because of what you achieve for yourself, but because of what you give to others. Albert's legacy lives on not in monuments or memorials, but in the hearts of the children he protected, the families he helped, and the community that learned from his example that love doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be practiced, one small act at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Inspiring Life Stories. Remember, you never know who might be watching over you with the quiet love of a guardian angel you've never met. Thank you for watching, and never forget, the greatest love stories are often the ones no one knows about until it's too late to say thank you.